say about preparing for this session is it's taken me a long time, and I've done a lot of reflecting and thinking about how best to do this, what to cover. We've got so much material to cover that I could have really effectively spent the whole day talking about the advocacy that we've done over the last 2 years. And the purpose of this session is very much to celebrate our advocacy, but it's also to reflect and to learn. That's right. You can't hear me? Okay. I'll stand here. All right. Sorry. Apparently that's better. Okay, so the purpose of this session is very much to celebrate, because it's very important that we do that, to pause and stop and celebrate. And I think when you work in communities, you all know how important that is. But it's also an opportunity to reflect and learn what our learnings from the journey. And in some ways, it's part of the healing process. We were organising, obviously it takes quite a long time to pull something like this together, so when we were organising this, June, July time, both groups of our members, Neighbourhood Centres and CRCs, were in complete turmoil. The Neighbourhood Centres were just about to address a competitive tender. CRC's funding, some of cuts were still in place. And I had a meeting with Rob and Celia and said, we're really struggling with what to do, etc. And Rob's wise words were, people need to heal and come together. And this session is part of that process. In fact, the whole day is part of that process. And as I said at the beginning of this morning, we are incredibly grateful for everybody who's here today, because we know the journey that you've been on over the last 2 years and how exhausted you all are. And even just speaking to some of you this morning, you were saying, you're really limping now to the end of the year and you're sort of ticking off the boxes of the last things that you need to get done for your contracts, etc. And in acknowledging that, I also want to acknowledge the Department of Communities staff and the Department of Primary Industries and Regional Development staff, because it's been tough for them too. And it's been a very bruising, frenetic, stressful and eventful year for all of us. And you can hear my voice is croaky. I shouldn't be making a noise anymore because it should be switched off. And that's because it's been a very emotional journey as well. And I'm not going to apologise for being emotional. So the advocacy story started for Linkwest and the Neighbourhood Centres in June 2016, when the budget board estimate showed the property divestment decision by the Barnett government, which was to impact about 30 neighbourhood centres. And what this was going to do was to remove security of accommodation as they went into a tendering process for their new contracts. At that time, we didn't know that they were going to be competitive. And I won't talk you through every point along the journey because, as I say, we'll be here all day. So there's a slideshow showing which sort of highlights some of the things that have happened along the way. So what have we achieved as a network? Well, the Neighbourhood Centre campaign was very complex and messy. And the initial campaign, Hands Off Our Centres, had to be created in a very, very short period of time. However, within weeks of starting the campaign, we're very thankful that Minister McGurk made the decision to overturn the funding cut to 23% of the programme, stop the original programme going to tender, and authorise the full sector consultation, which was facilitated by Peter Kenyon from August 2017. In June this year, Minister McGurk further announced that the government had also reversed the property divestment decision, giving those centres going into a competitive tender security of tenure in their accommodation, without which they would have had very, very little chance of winning those tenders. Unfortunately, we did not manage to stop the tenders going to competitive tender. However, all of those things are really quite incredible major achievements, and I want you all celebrate and recognise what you have achieved as a network. So, clap your hands, hug each other. The advocacy for the CRC started with the shortening of the CRC contracts in April 2017, but really got into full swing in September at the Belonging Conference last year, after the budget showed a cut of 40% in the forward estimates commencing on the 1st of July 2019. This campaign was difficult because the landscape changed almost weekly with new developments, and we were having to be very, very reactive. However, as you were all very well aware, on the 10th of August 2018, after a very intense period of campaigning, the hashtag CRCs are the answer, Minister McTiernan announced that the funding cuts would be overturned. So again, what an incredible achievement, and well done, everyone. So I think for me, that's going to be one of those moments in my life where I'll remember exactly where I was when I heard the news. And I was on a course in Melbourne, and I had to have my phone switched on to silent. I went for lunch. We had broke for a very late lunch at 2 o'clock, switched on my phone, and I'd missed 29 calls. I thought, what the hell has happened? And I was actually very concerned because I've got an elderly mother. And I picked up the phone. I didn't even look at the messages. I was so worried. But I picked up the phone and phoned the Linkwest office, and Joe picked up the phone and said, "I cannot believe I'm the person telling you this news." It was so amazing. The people that I was on the course with, I've been on a course with them now for a year. They were all crying. We were all crying together. I phoned Kate and Lee. Kate was driving back from Kalgoorlie. She was crying. I phoned Lee, she was crying. We were all crying. I think we were in absolute shock and and elation. And the incredible results that we've achieved for both the Neighbourhood Centre and CRC campaigns can be reflected in the message that I got from Peter Kenyon saying, these are historic outcomes for WA communities. So, who cares about neighbourhood centres and CRCs? And I guess that's a question I'm asking you, and you might want to try and answer. Who actually cares about our network and our members? I don't know if anybody wants to put up their hand. Yeah, Petra.
Well, in our centre, it was a lot of
community members.
Yes.
So, as Cormac would say, citizens. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that is exactly right. Communities pull together. And I mean, in fact, if they hadn't, and if the citizens and the community hadn't cared, we wouldn't have had a leg to stand on. But they really showed that they did care. And they became very concerned about what they were about to lose. And I think an inspirational example of where that happened was with Nicola Kyler, who brought the community of Wandering together to save the CRC. It was also demonstrated by the 8,000 signatures on the Neighbourhood Centre petition presented by Jorn Sidmer. We received multiple letters of thanks from CRC committees and Neighbourhood Centre committees. It was also demonstrated by all the wonderful messages from people who use CRCs and neighbourhood centres on the postcard displays and the postcards that were sent to members of Parliament. And in addition to that, it was also demonstrated by the wonderful videos that were created where people spoke about what their neighbourhood centre or their CRC meant to them. So yes, citizens showed that they cared. The community showed that they cared. Do you know who else cared? Who else cares about neighbourhood centres and CRCs? Yep. I'm sorry, I can't see you right at the back. Absolutely. So I would say, without a doubt, we met with many, many members of Parliament, and particularly those when it came to CRCs or our neighbourhood centres. If they had a centre in their community, they really cared, and particularly where they had a relationship with them. And that was across all parties. You know, what I was really blown away by was, in fact, Diane Evers, members for the Greens, who was absolutely tireless in her advocacy in multiple different ways. I bumped into her at the launch of the Falling Through the Net, the Digital Divide of WA launch report that I'd gone to specifically to advocate. And we fell into each other's arms and gave each other a huge hug. We felt as though we knew each other. She was really very passionate about it. But so were obviously the Nationals, because they have many members in their electorates, the Liberals, and even One Nation. So many members of Parliament cared. Many ministers did. You know, those like Minister Murray. And Minister Dawson cared a lot, because they have a lot of CRCs in their electorates and neighbourhood centres. So Linkwest actually received, with the overturning of the CRC funding cuts, we received 90 messages of congratulations. And they were from people like Dr. Carmen Lawrence, Peter Kenyon, Louise Giolotto, CEO of WACOS, Helping Minds, a mental health provider, Advocare, a seniors advocacy group, Financial Counsellors Association of WA, Neighbourhood Houses Tasmania, the Health Consumers Council, Connect Groups, the peak body for self-help and support groups, many CRCs, neighbourhood centres, and the state peak, the Association for Neighbourhood Houses and Centres Australia. So many other organisations and not-for-profits and service providers care, because they know what difference you make in the community. And that's reflected in the letter that I got, the email that I got from Louise Giolotto from WACOS. Hi, Jane and team. On behalf of all the team here at WACOS, the biggest congratulations. We know how hard you worked on this. You must all be very proud. You have had an incredible impact. Respect from WACOS, and we're all giving you a bow and a hug. But the next sentence is the really significant one. In truth, you will never know the impact you have had on people's lives in regional WA. However, we all know it is significant. The CRC and neighbourhood centres are so important. Hand on heart, the policy team here at WACOS are so happy for you all. So, I think it's really important to understand that it isn't just us because we work in the sector, and it isn't just, and I use that word very lightly, the citizens. There's actually a lot of service providers out there who really value you and know how important you are. And in fact, during the campaigns, many of them wrote to support you. WACOS wrote. The WA Network of Alcohol and Other Drugs, PEAK, wrote. Volunteering WA, Connect Groups, WALGA, Adult Learning Australia, Anchor again, Neighbourhood Houses Tasmania again, Consumers of Mental Health WA, Council on the Ageing, Communities Employers of WA wrote to the Treasurer, Advocare wrote to and JobLink Network. They wrote those letters because they really cared. They really cared what happened to you and your centres. I also think I need to make a special mention of Partners in Grain and Country Women's Association of WA, because not only did they write and show their support, they did it very publicly. And they went public, and they wrote media releases, and they came out very publicly in support of the Community Resource Centre Network. And I've had many other conversations with CEOs or senior staff of PEAKs who knew that the impact of the funding cuts to both groups and the threat to local community and grassroots organisations and what that would mean to community sector and service providers. They knew that it was going to increase their workload. So who else cared? Who else cared and came out in support of us? Who's we? So all of us, absolutely. I mean, again, if we didn't care, then we would have been in trouble. We really cared. And we all worked incredibly hard. Our achievements that we've got has been a team effort. I mean, it's, yes, you know, having a peak body gives you the advantage of having that coordination and that voice in Metro WA. But every single centre that could did something in support of this of these campaigns. The other group that I'd like to recognise who really cared, and Kate referred to them, is the media. So when Virginia Aden, CEO of Sudbury House and Linkwest board director, at great personal cost to herself, which caused her an awful lot of stress and conflict, launched the public campaign for neighbourhood centres, Hands Off Our Centres. It was covered by the ABC, and on the ABC Facebook page it got over 13,000 likes. That spurred on nearly every local community newspaper that had a centre to feature their local centres. South Lake Otti Centre, Yangebup Centre, Forest Lakes, Thornley, Warnborough, Westerly, is just to name just a few of the neighbourhood centres. I know Rainbow Coast, in Albany, Manjimup Family Centre, Kununurra Neighbourhood House, the list goes on. The media were interested, they cared about what was happening in their local community. The same with CRCs Are the Answer. In fact, it was quite difficult to control once it took off. And, you know, the number of calls that we were getting to the office to speak on the radio, 6PR. We spoke to Triple M, ABC, 6PR. The funding cuts overturn was covered by Mornings with Peter and Paula on ABC and Drive with Jeff Hutchinson. Fairfax Media, Kate mentioned a number of the Fairfax reporters went out of their way to cover stories. Fairfax Media and community newspapers in the West Australian all covered stories. The CRC funding cuts were even covered by ABC on national television, featuring Denmark and Walpole CRCs and some of the groups that were meeting there. Social media, CRCs Are the Answer had nearly 900 followers and likes. So the media really cared about what was happening in their local community. So if so many people cared, how did we end up in this situation? Has anybody got any ideas? I mean, we've touched on it a little bit. There you go. Somebody over here said we didn't sell ourselves. Kate talks about the stories. What are our stories? People need to know what the experiences that centres are providing and the difference you're making to people's lives. I've got a little analogy. So it was, and it was something I was reflecting on when I was thinking, how did we find ourselves in this situation? And it's not just one thing. In fact, there's multiple things that brought us to this situation. But the thing I was reflecting on is when we were reading through the postcards in the postcard campaign and on social media where citizens were expressing their support for both groups of centres, a phrase came up quite regularly, and that was, this centre is the glue in our community. That is fantastic. Glue is magic stuff. It's strong, it holds things together, but it has two really big problems. Do you know what they are? Pardon? You can't see it. It's invisible. The chairs you're sitting on probably have glue in them. The tables that you're sitting at probably have. In fact, everything that you rely on in life probably has glue in it somewhere. So when do we usually become aware of glue? When it breaks. That's right. or when we use it. So the centre users know that the glue's there, and unfortunately, quite often, the times when people don't know about CRCs or neighbourhood centres only hear about them when the glue's faulty. And as Kate said, you know, our network isn't unique. If you look at any sector, there will be organisations that go through tough times. But unfortunately, what happens is if you're not aware of the glue when it's doing its job, you only become aware of the glue when something goes wrong. The other problem is that we're not speaking to the core concerns of government. If we don't speak to their core concerns, they're not going to care about our networking centres, and we'll find ourselves in a similar situation. So through the campaigns, both the campaigns, the media, and again, this is something that Cormac referred to, made what was invisible visible. It made the glue obvious. And we started to try and speak to the core concerns of the key decision makers and the politicians. And that is in no small part to the work of Kate, who knows how to work the media, how to react and when to react, what kind of content to create, for example, the videos. Could contact video producers and produce wonderful videos at very short notice at greatly reduced prices, and put in hours and hours of her personal time working the media, putting out media releases, speaking to politicians, key influencers in business and regional WA and on the campaign. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Kate for the work that she has done on behalf of our network, because I do not think that we would have had nearly the impact that we've had without that ability to work the media. So Kate, would you like to come up? It's small, but it's the thought that counts. Sorry. And I would also say that that demonstrates the importance of having diversity on your boards. I was speaking to a coordinator the other day, and I apologise if this isn't very politically correct, but she said, Jane, I never realised that one of the key KPIs for a job description for a coordinator is to be a stalker. And she said, and you know what? I'm really good at it. And she said, you know, I was talking to her about, in fact, it was a 40th anniversary event. I don't know if Jodie's in the room, not Jodie Neald. But she was running there was a Loftus Community Centre celebrating their 40th anniversary. And I said, how did it go? You know, because the weather was atrocious. She said, I managed to get all the politicians. I got the mayor, the local councillors. She said, a few years ago, I wouldn't have been able to get any of them there. They all came. The other area where being a stalker really works is getting good people on your boards, and I stalk. That's how I get people on my boards. I knew we needed somebody that would help us with the media. It's an area that we don't have the core skills. I've certainly not had any of that experience. It's not an area I'm particularly comfortable with. So, yeah, so brush up on your stalking skills, everyone. All right, so how did we talk to the core concerns of government? Well, again, driven by Kate, we developed a 2-page flyer where we tried to speak to their core concerns around their reform agenda, the service priority review, the sustainable health review, how CRCs were small and neighbourhood centres represented small investment, big impact. Each minister was, and that was emailed out to every politician, each minister was written a letter which outlined what the CRC network was currently delivering in their portfolio, what future opportunities were and what the risk to their portfolio if the funding cuts went ahead. Again, we were trying to speak to their core concerns as a minister. We managed to secure meetings with the Attorney General, John Quigley, Minister Dave Kelly, Minister Stephen Dawson and Ministers Mick Murray. Now, Minister Murray and Minister Dawson have regional seats with many neighbourhood centres and CRCs in them. They knew about our centres and they really valued them, but they were in a minority in Cabinet, and the other Cabinet members did not share the same core concerns. However, with the other members that we did manage to see, I can still remember registering shock on some of their faces when we actually presented them with the data in relation to what CRCs deliver. In fact, one of Minister Papalia's policy advisors, when I said to him, "Have you ever heard of CRCs?" he said, "I can assure you we have now." The point of that statement is the Minister's policy advisor for small business and tourism had not heard of CRCs. You know that you all do a huge amount of work in those areas. And this is not a blame game. These are very, very busy people. You need to go out and tell them what you're doing and show them what you're doing. You know better than anyone else how fantastic you are. They just need to be invited in and shown it. I'm pleased to say that as a result of the advocacy campaign, Minister McGurk took the initiative and went out and visited many neighbourhood centres after the campaign, and really the difference and the depth of understanding was significant. I want to recognise Paul from Broome CRC, who very effectively educated and spoke to many people's core concerns by combining the postcard campaign with social media and tagging the various ministers to say, this is what we are doing. This person is saying, thank you to Broome CRCs for doing this. This is speaking to a core concern. It's very unfortunate that we needed to go through an adversarial, two adversarial advocacy campaign, but there have been many other great outcomes from the process. At a local level, many of our centres are now reporting that they have much better working relationships with the local politicians and local councillors and mayors, and they want to know what you're doing in your centre. They know you're there now. The glue is starting to become visible. So, for example, and now, again, I would just like to really recognise a few people. So, Christy from Forest Lake Thornley Family Centre, at the start of the Neighbourhood Centre campaign, I'm not sure whether Christy had a relationship with any of the local politicians. Now, Christy has the local state lower house member, the local state upper house member, the local federal lower house member and the local federal upper house member visiting her centres on a very regular basis. Every time they come, there's pictures taken and they usually end up in the local paper. All of those people, as far as I know, wrote letters of support for her, her competitive tender. That was building a working relationship with her local members. And she went from 0 to 60 in a very, very quick space of time. Frank Konechny have also done a fantastic job by inviting in and getting to know Roger Cook and Rhys Whitby. Tanya from Westerly contacted the Premier's local electorate, and his local policy advisor visited her centre with Natalie from Warnborough Family Centre, and he was blown away by what they were doing. Many of our members are now reporting that they have much better working relationships with their local members. Okay. So that's at a local level. And as Cormac Russell talks about it, we need to create now a mass local movement. So it's local, but we're coming together to create a mass local movement, which is what we did for the campaigns. And it's connecting the glue from each of the communities to each other, and that's where we come in. One of the, I saw a fantastic example of the invisible becoming visible last Friday evening at the WA Regional Development Awards on Friday night. Where one neighbourhood centre and 4 CRCs and Linkwest were all highlighted in one way or another in the awards, with Narrabeen CRC being a winner, which was fantastic. And at that was Minister McTiernan, DPER DG Ralph Addis and Shadow Minister Jim Chown, all seeing some of the magic glue at its sparkling best. And the support within the room for all of those people as well. If you want to connect to a core concern for Minister McTiernan, one of the things she spoke about in that evening was the integration of migrants and refugees into regional communities. Well, hello, what do? That is exactly what we do. So if you have a centre that runs Harmony Weeks, Harmony events, has multicultural events, and I know many of you do. Manjimup does a lot. We've got Rainbow Coast here who actually have funded to run a settlement program. Invite her to come and see what you're doing. And while you're there, say, we're one of a network of 150 other centres who are all doing similar or very similar work in different communities. Another way of connecting into a core concern, which I would really request that really encourage us all to take part in, is Minister McGurk's 16 Days in WA initiative. This is going to be happening between November and December, and it is an awareness-raising 16 days against family and domestic violence. We started last year, again, Kate took the initiative and picked this up, where as many people as possible, member centre managers came together in some of their community wearing orange, taking photographs, posting on Facebook in support of the campaign. Centres can, I actually only got the letter about this highlighting that it is happening again this year, and orange is the colour again this year on Friday. But it's a way that we can show that our network can be activated to create social change at a local level and change the narrative of something that is actually a scourge on society in WA. And this is a way that we can not only make a difference in our local communities, but we can actually show that the network cares and is speaking to the core concern of that minister. If you're running a fantastic tourism event or you've got a small business or breakfast meeting, invite Minister Papalia. He might not come, they might not come, but if the invitations start rolling in for all these incredible things that you're doing, the story will start to change about what this glue is doing and that the glue is actually working. There are other ways that we can work together as a network. We have Neighbourhood House Week in 2019. Neighbourhood House Week is an opportunity to come together and showcase the difference we make. Kate talked about data collection. In actual fact, we have a new set of data that we are about to launch around CRCs, building on the report that Kate referenced. But if we do a survey, and I know you're all surveyed out to death, we need data to support you and to advocate on your behalf. We also have, as I mentioned, the Linkwest Federal Government Advocacy Committee, and they will now be working at a federal level, as will the national peak. And if you want an inspiring example about what can be achieved through positive advocacy of a network working together, only last week, only last week, the Victorian Minister for Communities announced 21.8 additional funding to centres in Victoria. That includes extra funding for support to centres, 16 new centres, funding for 11 currently unfunded centres and additional funding for existing centres. That was a 4-year positive profile raising campaign, and it shows what we can achieve as a network. So we need to be ambitious about what we can achieve. I realise that I'm running out of time, so I'm going to quickly move on. So where are we now? Neighbourhood centres and other applicants for the Empowering Communities programme, which, as I said, was a competitive tender, will hear the outcome in mid to end of December 2018. As this is a competitive tender outcome, the outcome is unknown and therefore is creating great uncertainty for those groups and committees. And this is where I might get quite emotional. At this point, I want to acknowledge absent neighbourhood centre staff and committees and those in the room. I mentioned about glue failing when there's a fault. There's another time when glue fails, and that's when it's put under too much pressure. The competitive tender process and the unrelenting pressure of the last 2 years has taken its toll on the staff and committees of these centres. It's resulted in high turnover due to uncertainty of employment, high turnover of volunteer boards, and high levels of anxiety and stress-related illness created by the stress of addressing a competitive tender and delivering on contract at the same time. These organisations that are run by passionate people in their communities, and they have been in their communities, some of them for 30 years. These people will learn if their centres will continue to be funded mid to end of December. I've personally worked with many of the staff and the boards over the 9 years I've been in this role, and I am deeply concerned about their mental health. Mihaela returned from maternity leave to take on the role of the Neighbourhood Centre Manager and started calling centres to catch up and invite them to come along today. Her comment to me was, "I feel like I'm talking to a group of people with PTSD. I had no idea of the level of anxiety." These are organisations that are, some of them, celebrating 30 years in their community. Many, like Kananara Neighbourhood House, are just about to build a new building and don't know whether they're going to be funded. Or Manjimup Family Centre that have just finished building an extension. And if they're not funded, because this is their core funding, they will have to wind up and move out. Many of them, not all of them. And many of the people that Mihaela spoke to said they just couldn't face coming today, which is sad because we don't know if they're going to be part of the sector next year. And I'm sure those here from CRCs can really empathise with what the Neighbourhood Centre staff and committees are facing, having been very close to being in a similar position not that long ago. And it drives home the important need for the strong, positive advocacy now and into the future to try and prevent the same fate happening to any of our centres again. The CRCs will continue to have their contracts extended until the 30th of June 2020 with existing funding levels. The detail I don't know, but that is absolutely an incredible and very welcome news. Where does Linkwest stand? Well, our grant to provide sector support services to CRCs from Neighbourhood ends on the 31st of March 2019, and the future of this funding and services as yet unknown. Being a peak body and funded to deliver sector support services to the CRCs has enabled Linkwest to provide a holistic service to all CRCs, and the two contracts together are symbiotic and value add to each other through projects and resources that can be shared. Over the period of the contract with Neighbourhood, we've worked with over 80% of all CRCs individually, and as well as delivering resources and training to many, and worked intensively with a number. We hope that if you have valued the support that we have provided your CRC and the network, you will work with us in securing the funding from Neighbourhood to continue to deliver sector support services. We also have to retender for our Department of Communities funding in early 2019 through a preferred service provider contract, and that will obviously be another priority for us leading into at the beginning of next year. So now leading into hopefully 2 new contracts and potentially a refreshed sector, the Linkwest board is taking the opportunity over the next few months for some deep reflection on how it can best meet its purpose of supporting you all to develop vibrant, inclusive, connected communities and at the same time remain financially viable. It's an issue we all face. As the members, you are the core of Linkwest's being. We want to start by asking about your needs and thoughts about the future of Linkwest. So we will be sending out, I'm afraid, another survey in November, and we would hugely appreciate it if you could respond. A high response rate will ensure we have a good cross-section of members' views, which means we're more likely to come to the right conclusions. So, winding up before lunch, we've had a significant shake-up. We've learned that our network is valued and cared for and important by many. We need to be ambitious for our future and take on board the lessons learned over the last 2 years. We will go into 2019 refreshed and ready to show the world how amazing our network is. We have a conference in September 2019, which will be a summit, where we will be able to bring everyone who cares together, and we can all celebrate and look at a bright future together. So I look forward to seeing you all at our conference in 2019, and thank you all for the incredible work that you've been doing over the last few years.
Just very quickly before we recess, I just want to thank Jane for the outstanding presentation that she's just made. She has said that she needs work on her public speaking. I don't think she does. I can't actually think of a better way of a better speech that she could have done. With the insight, the tips, the lessons, and the very thorough update on the neighbourhood sector. As a CEO, she has shown exemplary leadership for many, many years, and I wanted to make the point again, we are so fortunate that she has been at the top as a CEO. Thank you.
So you'll be pleased to know we're moving into lunch, 12:30 to 1:30, so you can all talk and catch up. And then this afternoon session will be much more interactive, where you can all network and share your learnings. And I'm really looking forward to it. Mahela asked me to ask if the Neighbourhood Centre subcommittee could just stay in the room and meet with Mahela very, very quickly. Otherwise, enjoy. Thank you very much.